I'm Adam, 26 years old, working as a network technician for a mid-sized company in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been in this field for about 4 years now. I wouldn't say I love it, but it's steady work. And after grinding through tech certifications post-college, I'm grateful for the decent paycheck. Stability matters more to me than passion right now. I grew up in Greensboro, the second kid in a family of four. And I've always been the type who follows a practical path, probably because I've seen what happens when you don't. My older brother, Chris, is a dreamer, currently bouncing between jobs while he tries to make it as a musician. I didn't want that life. By 2023, I'd saved up enough to move out of my cramped one-bedroom apartment. That's when Alice and I decided to take the plunge. We'd been together since the spring of 2022, after meeting through mutual friends at a local brewery. She worked as a graphic designer for a marketing firm downtown, and was everything I thought I wanted: driven, confident, and honestly gorgeous. We were both practical people, so moving in together made sense. Rent was outrageous, and besides, spending weekends at each other's places had been easy enough. Hey, this is just the next logical step, I remember saying to her one night over dinner. She agreed. Alice was 25 at the time, and while she didn't grow up in a chaotic household like mine, she had her own baggage. Her parents divorced when she was a teenager, and she had a habit of brushing off deeper conversations about family stuff. I figured everyone's got their quirks, right? No one's perfect. We signed the lease for our new apartment in September of 2023. It was a cozy two-bedroom on the second floor of a low-rise building. The complex had decent reviews, quiet neighbors. Good maintenance, and was smack in the middle of both our commutes. It seemed perfect. The first few weeks living together felt like a dream. We spent evenings cooking, binging shows on Netflix, and decorating the apartment to make it feel like home. Alice was the type who loved Pinterest boards, so soon enough, there were cute little signs like live, laugh, love hanging in the kitchen. We had this phase where we thought we'd be that couple who meal prepped every Sunday and exercised regularly. It didn't last long, but hey, we tried. But you know how they say the honeymoon phase doesn't last forever? Yeah, they're not kidding. It started with the little things. I'd come home and notice half-empty glasses of water everywhere. On the coffee table, on her nightstand, even the bathroom counter. At first, I joked about it. Hey babe, you starting a water collection or something? I said one night. Alice laughed. I just forget where I leave them. No big deal, right? No big deal, I echoed, shaking my head. But it stuck with me. Then there was the hair. Everywhere. Long, dark strands stuck to the bathroom tiles, clogging the shower drain, and even turning up in our bed. I'd step into the shower only to find myself fishing out enough hair to stuff a pillow. Again, I tried to brush it off. What was I going to say? Hey, could you stop shedding like a golden retriever? Probably not the best move. Adam, girls shed. Get over it, Alice said when I finally mentioned it. She didn't seem bothered, but it started grating on me. I'm a pretty low-maintenance guy. I like things clean, but not obsessively so. Still, the hair and water glasses weren't just annoying, they felt like the cracks forming in this perfect vision I had of our life together. Then came the moods. It wasn't like Alice was always moody or anything, but when that time of the month rolled around, it was like a storm cloud, followed her everywhere. She'd snap at me for the smallest things, leaving my shoes by the door, not folding the laundry, or taking too long to choose a movie. I wasn't prepared for how intense it would get. You have no idea how painful this is, she groaned one night, clutching a heating pad to her stomach. I'd offered to run to the store for snacks, but she snapped at me when I brought back the wrong brand of chocolate. Seriously? It's just chocolate, I said without thinking. Bad move. Her glare could have melted steel. It's not just chocolate, Adam. God, you don't understand anything. After that, I stopped arguing. What could I say? I wasn't going to win. Alice's quirks didn't stop there. She had no issue farting around me, something I didn't expect. One night, we were cuddled on the couch watching a movie when I heard a loud pff. I blinked, not sure if I'd imagined it. Alice glanced at me, totally unfazed. Oops, she said, giggling. Better out than in, right? I tried to laugh it off, but deep down, I was stunned. Wasn't there some kind of unwritten rule about keeping that stuff private? Apparently not for Alice. Over the next few weeks, she grew even more comfortable, letting out farts without a second thought. Sometimes, she'd even do it under the blanket just to mess with me. Are you serious right now? I groaned after one particularly bad incident. Relax, it's natural, she said, grinning. Natural doesn't mean pleasant, I muttered under my breath. Still, these moments weren't deal breakers. They were just surprising. Living together was turning out to be more of an adjustment than I'd anticipated. I guess I'd romanticized the whole thing, imagining Alice and I as this picture-perfect couple who never got on each other's nerves. Reality, as it turned out, was messier. I wasn't innocent in all this either. I knew I had habits that annoyed her. I'd leave socks on the floor, forget to wipe down the kitchen counters after cooking, and sometimes I'd zone out during conversations. Alice called me out on it regularly. "Are you even listening?" she'd ask, arms crossed. Yeah. Something about your day at work," I'd reply, trying to recall what she'd just said. She'd roll her eyes. Unbelievable. We both had our flaws, and we were slowly starting to see each other's unfiltered sides. I wasn't sure if that was a good thing yet. All I knew was that tension was creeping in like an invisible third roommate neither of us had invited. Looking back, those early weeks were just the beginning. The real challenges were still ahead. We were learning that living together meant confronting each other's reality quirks, moods, and all. Little did I know, things were about to get even more those days was about 2 weeks after we moved in together, right around mid-October 2023. I got home from work and immediately sensed something was off. The air in the apartment felt heavy. You know that vibe when someone's had a bad day but hasn't said a word yet? That. I found Alice sprawled out on the couch, wrapped in one of her many blankets, her face pale and tired. Netflix was on, but she wasn't paying attention. I asked, "Rough day?" "No, I'm fine," she mumbled, in that tone women use when they are definitely not fine. I figured she needed space, so I let it drop. I started tidying up, putting away my work stuff, and checking the fridge. That's when I noticed the mess in the kitchen. An empty carton of Ben & Jerry's on the counter, a half-finished jar of Nutella, and about 5 dirty spoons scattered around. Now, I'm not a neat freak, but Alice rarely left the kitchen in that state. I joked, "Hey, did you host a dessert demolition derby while I was gone?" Wrong move. She threw me a glare so sharp I almost flinched. "Can you not? I've had a bad day, Adam. I don't need your commentary right now." "Whoa, okay, relax," I said, raising my hands in mock surrender. "Relax? You try relaxing when it feels like your insides are being ripped apart," she snapped, her voice rising. It finally clicked. Oh, it's that time of the month. But being the clueless guy I was, I didn't immediately handle it well. I tried to lighten the mood, which was a fatal mistake. "Come on, it's just some cramps, right? It can't be that bad." The second those words left my mouth, I knew I'd screwed up. Alice bolted upright, her face red with fury. "Just cramps? Are you serious? You have no idea what's happening inside my body right now. Try bleeding for a week straight and feeling like someone's stabbing you in the stomach with a rusty knife. Then we'll talk about just cramps." I stood there, stunned, as she continued ranting about how men have no clue about women's struggles. She wasn't wrong, but damn, the intensity caught me off guard. I mumbled an apology and made a mental note, never minimize her period pains again. That night, I did what any smart man in my position would do. I grabbed the heating pad, stocked up on snacks, and stayed out of her way. It wasn't just the pain. It was the roller coaster of emotions that came with it. One minute she was moaning in discomfort, and the next she was crying during a dog food commercial because the puppy didn't get adopted right away. I learned to read the signs over the next few months. When Alice's mood started to dip, I'd instinctively check the calendar. If it was near the middle of the month, I knew it was time to tread carefully. But her period wasn't the only thing that affected her moods. Stress from work, family drama, everything seemed amplified now that we were living together. The quirks didn't stop there. Living with Alice meant adjusting to all sorts of habits I hadn't seen before. For example, the whole water glass thing I noticed early on turned out to be an ongoing battle. Every week, I'd collect a parade of half-empty glasses from around the apartment. It became a running joke between us. New world record, I'd say, holding up a tray with 7 glasses. Alice would shrug. "I forget, what's the big deal?" "It's not a big deal," I'd reply. Just odd. She also had a weird obsession with different blankets. I swear the girl had a blanket for every mood and occasion. There was the television watching blanket, the reading nook blanket, and a rotating selection of seasonal throws. We didn't even have enough storage space for all of them, so they ended up draped over every piece of furniture in the living room. "Why do you need so many?" I asked one night as she curled up with yet another blanket. "Comfort," she said simply. "Besides, they make the place look cozy." It was hard to argue with that. Our apartment did have a certain warmth to it now, even if it felt a bit cluttered. Then there were the, let's call them bodily quirks. Alice wasn't shy about things like farting or burping around me. The first time it happened, I was caught completely off guard. We were cuddling on the couch when I heard a loud. I froze, not sure if I'd imagined it. Alice didn't even flinch. Uh, did you just? I asked, trying to keep a straight face. She grinned. What? Better out than in, right? I laughed nervously, assuming it was a one-time thing. Spoiler, it wasn't. Alice got way too comfortable farting in front of me. She even started doing it under the blankets and then trapping me in there as a prank. Jesus, Alice, that's disgusting, I shouted, gagging as I tried to escape the Dutch oven. She was laughing so hard she could barely breathe. Oh, come on, you've done grosser things. It wasn't just the farts. Alice had no problem discussing bodily functions in graphic detail. One morning, she casually mentioned that her cramps were making her poop weird. I nearly choked on my coffee. Do you really have to share that with me? I asked. She raised an eyebrow. Oh, please, you fart in your sleep. You've lost the right to be squeamish. I couldn't exactly argue with that. Living together meant dealing with the messy, unfiltered realities of each other's lives. Still, there were moments where I questioned if I was cut out for this. The biggest challenge, though, was learning how to communicate through the tension. Alice had a habit of bottling things up until she exploded. I wasn't much better. I tended to withdraw when things got tough, which only made her feel more isolated. We were both stubborn, and our fights often spiraled into passive-aggressive standoffs. One particularly bad argument happened over something stupid: laundry. I'd left a pile of unfolded clothes on the bed, and Alice was already in a bad mood from work. Why can't you ever finish what you start? She snapped. Why are you always on my case about stuff like this? I shot back. Things escalated quickly. We threw verbal jabs at each other, each bringing up past grievances. Eventually, Alice stormed off to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I sat on the couch, fuming. Why does she always blow up over the smallest things? But deep down, I knew I wasn't innocent. I wasn't pulling my weight around the apartment, and I hated confrontation. That night, after we both cooled off, we had a long talk. We agreed to work on being more patient with each other and to address issues before they exploded. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. Living with Alice was turning out to be a test of patience and adaptability. I was learning that love isn't just about the good times, it's about sticking around through the mess and finding a way to make it work. Little did I know, the toughest test, the reality of living with Alice was starting to hit me hard. I was 26, working full-time as a network technician, juggling client deadlines, and trying to maintain some sense of order in my life. Stability was important to me. I'd always been that guy who craved structure. Maybe it was because of how chaotic things were growing up in a family where my older brother, Chris, couldn't stick to anything. Watching him flail through life had made me hyper-aware of routines and responsibilities. So naturally, I assumed Alice, being the organized graphic designer she was, would share my views on cleanliness and order. Spoiler alert, she didn't. The first sign that Alice had her own definition of comfort came one night when we were watching The Godfather. I'd been hyping the movie up for days. It's a classic, right? But Alice was barely paying attention, scrolling through her phone while snacking on popcorn. Then it happened. A loud poofed echoed from under the blanket we were sharing. I froze, turning to her with wide eyes. Did you just... Alice glanced at me casually and shrugged. Oops. Better out than in, right? She didn't even blink. I expected her to be at least a little embarrassed, but no, Pesci just kept munching her popcorn, eyes on her phone like nothing had happened. I laughed nervously, thinking maybe it was a one-time thing. It wasn't. Over the next few weeks, Alice became way too comfortable letting one rip around me. She wasn't apologetic about it either. Why are you acting like you've never heard a girl fart before? She teased when I finally brought it up. I mean, I didn't think you'd do it in front of me, I admitted. She smirked. Get used to it. Everyone does it. Sure, I knew bodily functions were natural, but I guess I wasn't ready for how openly Alice embraced it. The worst was when she did it under the blankets and then trapped me in there as a joke. Jesus, Alice! I yelled, gagging as I tried to escape the stench. She doubled over with laughter, tears streaming down her face. Oh my God, you should see your face right now. This is disgusting. What is wrong with you? It's called love, babe, she said between giggles. Love? Really? This was not what I'd envisioned when we moved in together. It didn't stop there. Living with Alice meant dealing with a host of quirks I hadn't seen before. Take the bathroom, for example. Alice had an entire arsenal of beauty products, cleansers, serums, exfoliators, masks. The bathroom counter looked like a Sephora exploded. And while she took meticulous care of her skin, She was a complete slob when it came to the actual space. Hair was everywhere in the sink, on the floor, clogging the shower drain. I couldn't step into the bathroom without finding a long, dark strand clinging to my socks. One morning I was brushing my teeth and noticed globs of dried toothpaste smeared on the counter. To top it off, a used tampon wrapper was sitting on the toilet lid. "Are you serious right now?" I muttered, staring at the mess like it had personally offended me. Later that day, I confronted her. "Hey, can you maybe clean up after yourself in the bathroom? It's getting a little out of hand." Alice rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. You leave your socks all over the floor, so you're not exactly Mr. Clean." "Okay, fair point. I did have a bad habit of leaving socks in random places or the couch, near the bed. But still, tampon wrappers? There's a difference between socks and you know that," I said, pointing toward the bathroom. "Oh, get over it." She shot back, clearly unimpressed. "It's not like you're handling it." I sighed, realizing this wasn't a battle I was going to win. Alice had her way of doing things and I had mine. But living together meant those differences were becoming harder to ignore. Our arguments became more frequent. They weren't explosive fights, more like a series of passive-aggressive skirmishes. Alice would make snide comments about my man-cave tendencies, and I'd jab back about her obsession with blankets. Seriously, how many blankets does one person need? Every time I turned around, there was a new one draped over the couch or hanging off a chair. "This is getting ridiculous," I said one day, gesturing to the pile of blankets. "They're cozy," Alice replied with a shrug. "Besides, they make the apartment feel warm." "Yeah, warm like a fabric store threw up in here." She shot me a look. "Don't start." Tensions simmered beneath the surface. We'd never had these issues before when we were just dating and spending weekends together. But now that we were sharing the same space 24/7, every little habit was magnified. I started dreading coming home some days, knowing there'd be another minor annoyance waiting for me, a sink full of dishes, hair in the shower, or yet another argument about chores. It wasn't just the physical mess. Emotionally, we were both feeling the strain. Alice had always been a perfectionist when it came to her work, and whenever she had a rough day, she'd retreat into herself. She'd curl up on the couch with her laptop, ignoring me for hours. I tried to be understanding, but it wasn't easy when I was dealing with my own stress from work. One night, after a particularly long day troubleshooting network issues for a client, I walked in to find Alice in full "don't talk to me" mode. The apartment was a mess, empty takeout containers on the counter, clothes piled on the chair. I snapped. "Is it really that hard to clean up after yourself?" I said louder than I intended. Alice looked up, her eyes narrowing. "Excuse me? I've been at work all day, and I come home to this? Oh, I'm sorry, Adam. I didn't realize I was your maid," she shot back sarcastically. We went back and forth, both too stubborn to back down. By the end of the argument, she stormed into the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. I sat on the couch, seething. This wasn't how I'd imagined our life together. Later that night, I knocked on the bedroom door. Alice didn't answer, but I went in anyway. She was lying in bed, facing the wall. "Hey," I said softly. She didn't respond at first. Then, after a long pause, she muttered, "I'm tired of fighting." "Me too," I admitted. "But we need to figure this out." We really talked for the first time in weeks. We both had things we needed to work on, and we agreed to be more patient with each other. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a step in the right direction. Living together was turning out to be a lot harder than either of us had expected. The rose-colored glasses were off, and we were finally seeing each other's flaws. But maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe this was what real love looked like: messy, complicated,
December
and full of
2023,
compromises. I was hanging on by a thread. Between the holiday rush at work and the constant tension at home, it felt like I was drowning. I'd been pulling long hours trying to wrap up projects for clients before year-end deadlines. Alice, meanwhile, was struggling with work stress too. Her firm had taken on several new clients, and they were pushing her to meet tight deadlines. Both of us were burned out, but instead of supporting each other, we'd been drifting further apart. We weren't fighting every day or anything, but there was this constant undercurrent of frustration. The small things, the dishes, the clutter, the farts, the hair in the drain kept piling up like emotional debris. Neither of us was dealing with it in a healthy way. I withdrew when things got tense, throwing myself into work. Alice coped by zoning out with her shows and comfort food. It was bound to explode sooner or later, and it finally did on a cold Tuesday night in December. I walked into the apartment around 7:30 p.m., tired and irritable. The second I stepped inside, the smell of burnt popcorn hit me like a punch in the face. The kitchen looked like a disaster zone, dirty dishes everywhere, a couple of takeout containers on the counter, and Alice's favorite blanket tossed haphazardly on the floor. She was lying on the couch in her oversized hoodie, scrolling through her phone with a blank look on her face. "Hey," I said, kicking off my shoes. She didn't reply. I dropped my bag by the door and headed to the kitchen, silently fuming. I could feel the tension building in my chest as I surveyed the mess. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool, but it wasn't easy. I was exhausted, and the last thing I wanted to do was clean up after both of us. "Why didn't you clean the kitchen?" I finally asked, keeping my voice as neutral as possible. Alice barely glanced up. "I have cramps. What do you want from me?" Her tone was sharp, like a warning shot. I sighed heavily. "Look, I get that you're not feeling great, but I've been busting my ass all day too. I can't do everything." That was the wrong thing to say. Alice sat up abruptly, her face contorted with anger. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were keeping score on who's suffering more. I didn't know you had it so hard, Adam." "Come on, that's not what I meant," I said, my frustration bubbling over. "I'm just tired, okay? I'm tired of coming home to this." "This? You mean me?" "No, I mean the mess, the stress, everything. We're both tired, but we're not doing anything to fix it. You think I enjoy nagging you about this stuff?" "Oh, right, because you're such a saint. Let's not forget how you leave your socks everywhere and never wipe down the counters," she shot back. "But yeah, I'm the problem." The argument escalated fast. We threw out every grievance we'd been holding in for weeks. I complained about the hair in the shower drain, the constant clutter, and how she never cleaned up after herself. She fired back about my bad habit show I left dirty laundry on the floor, forgot to do my share of the dishes, and zoned out when she tried to talk to me. It got ugly. At one point, Alice stormed off to the bedroom and slammed the door so hard it rattled the picture frames on the wall. I stood in the living room, my fists clenched at my sides, feeling like my head was going to explode. This wasn't just about the kitchen or chores. It was about the fact that we were both stretched to our limits and taking it out on each other. I paced around the apartment for a while, trying to cool off. My mind was racing with thoughts. Is this what living together is going to be like? Constant fights over stupid stuff? I hated confrontation, but I also hated feeling like this, like I was trapped in a cycle of resentment and misunderstandings. Eventually, I forced myself to calm down. I didn't want to go to bed angry, and I didn't want this fight to fester like all the other unspoken issues between us. I walked over to the bedroom door and knocked softly. "Alice, can I come in?" There was a long pause before she finally mumbled, "Whatever." I opened the door and found her lying on the bed, wrapped in one of her many blankets. Her eyes were red and puffy, like she'd been crying. Seeing her like that made my anger evaporate. I hated fighting with her. We were supposed to be a team, not enemies. "I'm sorry," I said, sitting down on the edge of the bed. Alice sniffled and wiped her eyes. "Me too. I feel like we're always fighting lately." "Yeah, me too," I admitted. "I don't want it to be like this." "Neither do I." We sat in silence for a moment, both of us too emotionally drained to say much. But then, slowly, we started talking, really talking. For the first time in weeks, we opened up about how we'd been feeling. I told her how overwhelmed I was with work, and how coming home to a messy apartment made me feel like I was failing at both work and home life. Alice admitted that she'd been struggling with anxiety and exhaustion from work, which made it hard for her to keep up with chores. "I'm not trying to be lazy," she said quietly. Sometimes it's hard to even get out of bed when I'm in pain or stressed." "I get it," I replied. "I've been in that place too, but we have to figure out a better way to handle this. We're both exhausted, and we're just taking it out on each other." She nodded. "Maybe we need to set some boundaries or routines. Like, I can take care of certain things and you take care of others. That way, it doesn't feel like everything's piling up on one person." "Yeah, I think that's a good idea," I agreed. We spent the next hour coming up with a plan. It wasn't anything fancy, just basic stuff like dividing up chores and setting aside time to check in with each other. But it felt like a step in the right direction. By the time we finished talking, the tension between us had eased. I hugged her tightly, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like we were on opposite sides. We were in this together. Living together was still far from perfect. We knew there would be more arguments, more annoyances. But that night marked a turning point. We were learning to navigate the messiness of life as a couple, flaws and all. And maybe, just maybe,
June 2024,
that was what love really
Alice and I
looked had finally hit our stride. We weren't perfect by any means, but we had found a way to live together without constantly stepping on each other's nerves. Looking back at those early months when we were fighting all the time, I can't help but shake my head. We were both so stubborn, stuck in our own frustrations and assumptions. Now, things were different. Not perfect, but different. Alice still had her quirks. The water glasses? Still a thing. I'd find half-empty glasses all over the place in the nightstand, next to the television, sometimes even in the bathroom. At this point, though, it didn't bother me as much. I'd just roll my eyes and chuckle. In fact, I'd started a joke about it. Looks like you're curating a water art installation, I said one day, holding up 3 half-empty glasses I'd collected from around the apartment. Hey, hydration is important, she shot back, grinning as she grabbed one of the glasses and took a sip. The hair in the shower? Yeah, that was still a daily battle. I'd learned to keep a drain snake handy, which made cleaning it out easier. The first time I used it, I pulled out what looked like a drowned squirrel. Alice gagged so hard she almost threw up. Okay, I'll try to keep it under control, she promised between dry heaves. But I'm not touching that thing. You're on your own. Fair enough. I figured that was the price I paid for cohabiting with someone who had long, beautiful hair. Not a terrible trade-off in the grand scheme of things. And yes, Alice still farted around me. At first, it had been shocking, but now it was just part of life. We even found ways to joke about it. One night, after she'd pulled off her signature Dutch oven prank again, I decided to get her back. The next evening, I snuck a whoopee cushion under one of her favorite blankets. She was lying on the couch, totally engrossed in some true crime documentary, when I casually sat down next to her and waited for the perfect moment. Can you hand me that blanket? I asked, pretending to be chilly. Here, she said, tossing it to me. As she adjusted her position, she leaned back right onto the whoopee cushion. The loud pee-pee-pee-pee-pee theft echoed through the room. Alice froze, her eyes widening in horror. Oh my God, was that? I burst out laughing, holding up the cushion triumphantly. Payback's a bee. You jerk! She shrieked, tackling me in mock outrage. We wrestled playfully for a minute before collapsing in a heap of laughter. Moments like that had become our new normal, playful, lighthearted, and full of inside jokes that only made sense to us. But it wasn't just the goofy stuff. We'd also grown in more meaningful ways. After that big argument back in December, we'd made a conscious effort to communicate better. It wasn't always easy. Old habits die hard, but we'd learned to check in with each other instead of letting resentment build. One Friday night in April, after a long week at work, I came home to find Alice sitting at the kitchen table, looking stressed. Her laptop was open, and she was furiously typing away on a report for a client. Hey, I said softly, setting my bag down. Tough day? She sighed, rubbing her temples. Yeah, this deadline is killing me. I haven't even had time to think about dinner. Normally, I might have gotten annoyed about the lack of food or the messy apartment, but I'd learned to recognize when she needed support instead of criticism. Okay, I said, grabbing my keys. I'll go pick up some takeout. Thai or pizza? She looked up, her eyes softening. Thai sounds perfect. Thanks, babe. It was a small gesture, but it made a big difference. We were finally learning to be there for each other in the ways that mattered. We'd also started dividing up chores more effectively. I handled the laundry and dishes, while Alice took care of the bathroom and vacuuming. We weren't sticklers for schedules, but having clear responsibilities reduced the number of arguments. And on weekends, we made a point to do something fun, to go hiking, visiting local markets, or just having a lazy brunch at our favorite diner downtown. One weekend in May, we decided to take a spontaneous road trip to Asheville. We spent the day exploring the Blue Ridge Mountains, taking in the fresh air and stunning views. There was something healing about being out in nature, away from the stresses of daily life. I needed this, Alice said as we stood on an overlook, the sun setting behind the mountains. Me too, I replied, slipping my arm around her shoulders. Moments like that reminded me why we were doing this, why we were putting in the work to make our relationship thrive. Of course, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. We still had our disagreements. Sometimes I'd slip back into my old habit of shutting down when things got tense, and Alice would call me out on it. Other times, she'd get snippy over something small, like me forgetting to take the trash out. But the difference now was that we didn't let those moments fester. We'd learned to apologize and move on instead of letting grudges build. One night, after a minor spat about whose turn it was to do the dishes, Alice sighed and said, "You know what? Let's just both do it and get it over with." We spent the next 20 minutes washing and drying in comfortable silence. By the time we finished, the tension had melted away. See? Teamwork? She said, bumping my hip playfully. Yeah, I muttered, trying not to smile. 6 months in, I'd come to realize that living with someone means embracing their imperfections and letting them embrace yours. I wasn't a saint. I still left socks on the floor and forgot to clean the counter sometimes. But Alice didn't hold it against me, just like I didn't hold the hair or the farting against her. The weird habits, the moods, the quirks, they were all part of what made Alice Alice. And for better or worse, I'd come to appreciate it all. As I lay in bed one night, listening to the comforting hum of the apartment around us, I felt a deep sense of peace. This was home now. Not just a physical space, but a life we were building together, messy, complicated, and full of laughter. I reached over and squeezed Alice's hand. She stirred slightly and mumbled, "Love you. Love you too," I whispered. And in that moment, I knew this was exactly where I was meant to be. What's the weirdest habit you've discovered after moving in with someone? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories.